Thank you, Vidyatara, for introducing me, and thank you for this opportunity. So I called the talk Daring to Look in the Mirror, with a subtitle, Are we brave enough and kind enough to enter the conversation? Those of you who are at Wyndham might recognise these references to braveness and kindness. I wasn't actually at the talk, but it really spoke to my heart. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. So that's the opening of a poem by the American poet William Stafford. It's a poem called A Ritual to Read to Each Other, and it's one of many wonderful poems that I've been introduced to, along with him, by Ananda and Manjushra through Wolf at the Door. And I found over the years that he has a great deal to say, which I found very relevant to my whole spiritual life, not just writing practice. Many of you will know the most famous of his aphorisms, if you can't write, lower your standards. And actually, if you can't do anything, lower your standards. So I've given a lot of thought to this question of writing as part of my spiritual life. And I think the best way I can describe it is that I see it as a crucial rung in the ladder of my practice. And I really love this image of the ladder. I think Bhante's given us a marvellous ladder. It's a marvellous ladder. It's leaning against the right wall. That's very important. But actually, for some of us, the rungs can be a bit far apart. He's given us lots of rungs in this ladder. But actually, depending on what we each need to do in our life, in our practice, we may need extra stepping stones, extra rungs. And for me, writing has been one such rung. And I'm very aware that we don't all need the same rungs. I very much love the Gandharva Sutra, and one of the things I love in that is each of the 52 teachers that Sudana goes to visit, at the end they say, well, I know about the enlightening practice of XYZ. I don't know about ABC. You've got to go and ask her about that. So I'm talking about what I know about this rung of the ladder, which is writing practice. And I also wanted to offer, because I'm aware that not everybody relates to this idea of ascending a ladder. Not everybody relates to the idea of a path. Some of us see our spiritual lives in very different terms. And I thought, okay, if that was the case for you, how might we see it? And I thought, we also need very different keys to the different padlocks that we put on the petals of our hearts. We want to open, but often there's something that we just can't unlock. And I think writing can be a real key for many of us in this respect. So lowering our standards. I have a feeling that writing's actually a bit of a Cinderella of a practice. I think we all think we know what writing is. We've all done it in some form. Maybe we've done it under duress at school, or in whatever way we think we know what it is. But dare we really do it? Dare we really just write? Don't rush. Don't stop. Don't edit. That's the challenge. If you really do that, what might you learn? So it's been a vital rung for me, because I feel that through writing practice over a long period, and with a lot of other practices and a lot of good friendships as well, but writing's particularly been a thing that has helped me to find my own voice. And actually, I didn't know what kind of person I was, to go back to the opening poem. I couldn't have told you, and you might not really have been able to work that out when you first met me, because I did a jolly good job at hiding that. I think it wasn't really till I was fortunate enough to be on the 2007 Akashavana retreat, and I was up the mountain, and as Vidyatara was saying the other day, everything gets stripped back. And at one point I had this very clear sense that I'd lived my whole life between these two poles. One with a very strong heart desire to save the world, whatever that meant, But the other pole was an experience of my own suffering, the suffering of the world being so intense and feeling it so strongly that I was never quite sure if I could manage to stay alive for the whole of the rest of my natural lifespan. And they're very big poles. And as we were hearing at Wyndham, that really is the stuff of the Bodhisattva ideal. How do we find something big enough to embrace that contradiction? And for me, that was ordination. I glimpsed on a retreat in 1995 this possibility, and that led me to ask for ordination. So I can say now, standing here, that the nub of this for me was the fact that I lived for 20 years unable to name one of the most defining experiences of my childhood. And when I started practicing in 1993, the language around that would have been something like being a victim, being a survivor of child sexual abuse. Now, there's a whole other story which I've written about why I don't subscribe to that narrative any longer. It's an oversimplified narrative, I'll just say that. But that led me to a very, very, very well-developed practice of concealment, of maraksha. When I came across maraksha in Know Your Mind, it was quite a stunning moment. And actually it was pathological. I practiced it as if my life depended on it, and maybe in a way it did. And I would say it was the primary form of my selfing. So to use that language where we talk about, we make the word self into a verb, the way we keep recreating ourselves. Well, I kept concealing myself. I have very many good ways of doing that. Being speedy, being busy, being good, taking lots and lots of responsibility, and all the time using it as a way of concealing what was really going on. And I was driven by shame. There's a lot more I'd like to say about shame at some point, but this isn't the moment. But that was the kind of picture. And it was a retreat a few years ago with Attila when I realised I had this great sensitivity to the suffering of the world, but because of my experience, I wasn't able to name my experience in that way that can be so earth-touching. And the image that came, that was like, I felt like a lightning conductor that wasn't earthed into the ground. It was receptive, but it couldn't discharge, it couldn't let go of what the experience was. And I did almost self-destruct a few times, as some of my friends have witnessed. So writing for me has become a way of touching earth. It slowed me down. I think of the elephant footsteps, think of the elephant and Akshobhya. I write word by word along the line. Sometimes it drives me mad because my mind is off at 100 miles an hour. Writing slows me down. It makes me less busy. I'm allowed to be as bad as I like on the page. I can be irresponsible. Nobody ever needs see. And this is something I say again and again when we teach writing workshops, when we do free writing collectively. Write it knowing that you never have to show anybody if you don't want to. You can tear it up, you can burn it. And the one I really like is I say, you can eat it if you like. You don't have to show people. And it's that way of coming into relationship with oneself on the page, and then you can make the decision to share that more widely, if you wish. So the practice itself I'm talking about is just writing. I'm not talking about being literary. I'm talking about getting a pen, getting a bit of paper, maybe in the morning, just writing 3 pages of longhand. Just write. Don't rush. Don't stop. Don't edit. It might be doing a collective free writing where we'll have maybe 20 minutes and we just write. And then sometimes, we'll have time afterwards to read and if we want to share. But the point is, you put whatever's in your mind on the page, unedited, unexpurgated. And the practice of doing this, we get to know ourselves. We get to know what's actually going on, rather than perhaps what we might like to think is going on. And Bhante talks about this. There's a lovely 6-page section in the Essential Sangharakshita where he talks about writing, and he says at one point, I was surprised to discover I was not merely annoyed, I was angry. And he talks about discovering this through writing. And it was great doing the work with the young women. It's been such a privilege and a joy. And one of the things was, after the first week that I spent with them, hearing that they'd really felt they'd got to know each other better through doing the writing together, through sharing the writing. And Hannah said to me she really felt it helped them get on the Metar boat with each other. And when I came back for the second time, I can't remember who it was, said to me, "We're looking forward to finding out more about each other." And I think that, for me, was proof that, yes, it was more than just about one's own self. It actually is about having that conversation, opening up to self and other. Yeah. So writing is a practice that brings about reflection. And how many times has Bhante said to us, if you want to grow wise, reflect on your experience. Really, really reflect on what your actual experience is. And it is like looking in the mirror. And what came to mind when I was thinking about this image of looking in the mirror is a poem by Sylvia Plath called Mirror. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of the little God, four-cornered. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink, with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is a part of my heart. But it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candle or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning, it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me, she has drowned a young girl. And in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day, like a terrible fish. Now, I have to say, I do think the fish gets rather bad press. I feel sorry for the fish, and I wanted to say to you, there's not time to share it with you now, but I'm sure it's the same fish that makes an appearance in Seamus Heaney's wonderful poem, The Guttural Muse. And he has a very different relationship with the fish. So, time is moving on. And I did kind of gather enough to fill a book, really, thinking about what I wanted to say. And Vajratara and I had a conversation this morning about murdering one's darlings. I don't know if you know this expression. Auden said it, of writing poems. You have all these really, really good bits you can't bear to leave out, but you have to, because actually it just gets too freighted with stuff. So I haven't had time to talk about the 3 levels of wisdom. I haven't had time to go into the fetters, the mara of literalism, and the magic of metaphor. I haven't had time to talk to you about how the writer is actually a past master at working that edge between karma niyama and dharma niyama, in that regularity of practice, that openness to the muse, to inspiration. I haven't had time to say anything about the conversation or the dialectic that's at the heart of the Bodhisattva ideal, that's at the heart of our movement, of our order. I haven't had time to talk about the cremation ground and how, when you've walked through the cremation ground, you can be with others in that cremation ground. Yes, this talk's short, life is short. It's messy in here, it's messy out there. Be brave, be kind. I want to share the whole Stafford poem with you, and if there's time, there's one darling that keeps trying to get back in. So, a ritual to read to each other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not to recognise the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes, or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. So I wanted to just end, have I got 2 minutes? with the end of a poem by Louis MacNeice, which is one of my most favourite of all time, which takes us back to the ocean that we were talking about yesterday, and the messiness. Run up the sail, my heart-sick comrades. Let each horizon tilt and lurch. You know the worst. Your wills are fickle, your values blurred, your hearts impure, and your past life a ruined church. But let your poison be your cure. Put out to sea, ignoble comrades, whose record shall be noble yet. Butting through scarps of moving marble, the narwhal dares us to be free. By a high star our course is set, our end is life, put out to sea.